Boom, Soul Not For Sale. What's going on, guys? Soul Not For Sale, as always. Coach Colin here, coolest high performance coach in the world. Let's get right into it. Have you heard the term mass formation? Now, I have not heard that term before. Not before this podcast or this interview that I watched. It's with Tucker Carlson and someone named Matthias Desmet. I believe that's how you pronounce his name. I'm not sure. But this is the podcast that made Tucker Carlson the Tucker Carlson that we know today. The one that got ousted from Fox because he said too much. The one that's been outspoken on every front. When all of his mainstream colleagues went left, he would go right. And I don't even mean politically. I don't mean to make that pun, but he was always straying from what the mainstream narrative was. He was always trying to show a different side, a different light, a different angle. And after watching this interview, this is the interview that blew his mind, that made him realize that he has to be that person, that made him realize that he has to speak out, no matter what the consequences are, no matter how far it takes him away from his colleagues, no matter how far it takes him away from the company that he works with or worked with. And let's get into that right now. But first, of course, I got to bring you to the store real quick. I got to tell you guys, I'm making a audio version of this podcast because I want to start interviewing people. And I'm just going to go ahead and call it Soul Not For Sale. So if you check it out on Spotify, you're going to find it as Soul Not For Sale. And that store that I just showed you, you guys know what it is. It helps us fight demonetization. It helps us fight against them limiting our videos for no apparent reason. And every single purchase is so appreciated. That store again is coachcolin.com. Oh, sorry, I am coachcolin.com. So hit up the store. It helps us so much. And for anybody who's purchased anything, you are so appreciated. Thank you so much. But let's get right into the video. Here it is.
I stumbled upon, or I tried to re-articulate my theory on mass formation in public space then.
Wait, we had the same experience
exactly
in the United States on the show in the spring of 2020. It became clear that the original Imperial College predictions, which were the basis of our public policy here in the United States, were completely wrong, and nobody cared. In fact, they reacted with hostility if you pointed it out.
Absolutely.
What?
Absolutely.
So just the predicate here, the background. You pointed to 1979 as an example where this happened in another country with a large group of people. Mm. Is this a feature of history? Have we seen this a number of times?
Mass formation has existed as long as mankind exists. So there are we've had the Crusades, the witch hunts, the French Revolution, then the mass formations in the Soviet Union, the mass formations in Nazi Germany. So it has existed as long as mankind exists, but for a specific reason, the mass formations became stronger and stronger and stronger throughout the last few hundreds of years. And that's interesting because in the first half of the 20th century, the masses became so strong that, led by certain leaders, they could seize control of the state apparatus. And that's how totalitarian states emerge.
Yes.
Totalitarian states, Hannah Arendt says, are always a diabolic pact between the masses and their leaders. It's a diabolic pact between the masses and their leaders, and in this way, like a completely new kind of state emerges, which is completely different from a classical dictatorship. In a classical dictatorship, there is a small group of people, a dictatorial regime, who has such an aggressive potential that people are so scared of them that they can impose unilaterally their social contract to society. Yes. But the totalitarian state emerges in a completely different way. In a totalitarian state, there is first the process of mass formation, which is a process through which a certain part of the population, usually about 30%, fanatically starts to believe in a certain ideology. And this phenomenon can be created artificially through indoctrination propaganda.
And just to pause, you think that number can be as low as 30%?
Yes, usually it is not higher than 30%. Yes.
That's scary.
That's scary because, yes, but there is always 60 or 65% of the people who do not really go along with the narrative, but who will never speak out, who will always choose the easy way and go along with the people, with this group of people that seems to have the loudest voice. And that's why in the end, up to 95% or even sometimes even more, go along with the totalitarian narrative, with the narrative that led to the mass formation. And there is then an additional 5% that doesn't go along with it, that tries to speak out. And that's extremely important. If you understand the mechanism of mass formation, if you really understand it, then you know what this small group should do. If it makes the wrong analysis, it will be destroyed in the end. The chance is very high that it will be destroyed. If it starts from the correct analysis, it will survive. That's why it is so extremely important to understand how this mechanism works. Because I've just mentioned that mass formation makes individuals completely blind for everything that goes against what the group believes in. But there is two other characteristics that are also extremely important. And the first one is that when people are in the grip of mass formation, they seem to lose all awareness of their individual interests. They are prepared to radically self-sacrifice. That's extremely strange. And then the third characteristic, which is the most problematic, is that people in a mass formation become radically intolerant for dissonant voices.
Yes.
And in the ultimate stage of the mass formation, they will typically start to destroy everyone who doesn't go along with the masses, and they will do so as if it is their ethical duty to do so. To refer to the revolution in Iran again, I was talking to this woman in Iran, Shoref Ishtali. This conversation is available on the internet. And she told me how she has seen with her own eyes how in the last stage of the mass formation, a mother reported her son to the state, how this mother hung the noose around the neck of her son when he was on the scaffold. And when he was hung, she claimed to be a heroine for what she had done. That's the end stage of mass formation. And this end stage...
A mother killing her own son.
Yeah. And if you understand the mechanism, as I explain it in my book, The Psychology of Totalitarianism, it's perfectly logical why that happens. And that's why it is so extremely important. This last stage of mass formation can be prevented if the small group who doesn't go along with the mass formation makes the right choice. It has to make the right choice. And then this choice has everything to do with whether it will choose to speak out or whether it will remain silent. If it doesn't speak out, it will be destroyed because the masses will move to the last stage. So it's just quintessential for this group to continue to speak out in a honest, sincere way.
It's pretty amazing. It's pretty amazing. I don't know about you, but I've seen this. I have seen this throughout the past 3 years, 4 years. I've seen families get ripped apart based on, political leanings, based on what they're willing to put into their bodies or not put into their bodies. I know of a couple where a husband didn't want anything to do with the jabs and a wife did, and she went behind his back and got it, and then later had a heart attack. Like, that's a real story that I know of. And it just, put their family in very, very strained. I'm sure you've heard stories of, one parent thinks that the jabs are good, brings the kids, go get them, do this and that, and the other parent doesn't, and they have to do it behind their back, or even I remember in Canada. In Canada, there was a whole thing where there was a certain, I believe it was Ontario, they were making it okay for children. Like, children didn't need parental consent to go and get the jab at all, and there were children that were doing it. It's very, very, very telling, this whole thing that he's talking about, and again, you could see certain people, they were doing these things like it was their duty, exactly what he said, as if it was their duty. And again, this is the podcast that did it for Tucker. I'm going to be posting clips about this throughout the week. What is it, Wednesday today? So yeah, I'm going to be releasing at least two or three of these a day up until Friday. I'm just going to go through the whole thing. I'm only halfway through it now, but what this gentleman talks about and the way he breaks it all down, I mean, you've heard it here in the first 5 minutes that I've played for you. He is so on point. He is so clear cut on point with what has gone on around us. And it starts to make a lot of sense. A lot of sense, especially when he brought up the 30%. Just 30% of people. Because sometimes when you're online, you're like, wow, there's a lot of people that really believe in this certain ideology. And then you go outside and then you're just like, I don't see that many people that are like that. In fact, as I keep meeting people, they seem to be more in line with what I think, or, you know, we can brand it as more normal thinking. You know, they don't have this woke craze going on. I'm not seeing many of those people. I'm only seeing those people online in protests and rallies, but I'm not seeing them in everyday life. Not as much as you'd think. And it really makes you question, like, are there that many people that feel this way? Are there that many people that wanted certain mandates? Are there that many people? Or maybe it was just a very vocal minority of people that were screaming for this. And then there's a bunch of people who just go along. And like, let's say it was 30%, like he said. If now all of a sudden you can get 20% of people who are just like indifferent and just kind of get pulled with the wind, now those people are over there. Now it's like, now you got 50%. Then all of a sudden 50% of people seem to be going along with this thing. Well, that another 20% kind of look over and go, huh, I guess this is the right thing to do. I don't know. They're screaming that it is. And then they go along with it. You know, and that can happen more and more, higher percentages, if that other side doesn't speak. And I really do think that's why Tucker started speaking out. He always had a very vocal way of going about things, but after this interview, it like kicked up exponentially. He really started digging in to the things that he knew he should talk about. You know? He really, like I said at the beginning of this, he really would go right when all his colleagues went left. He would be like, let's look at it this way. Let's talk about it this way. Why isn't anybody talking about this? Why isn't anybody talking about that? He really started voicing his opinion. And as I break down these clips with you, you'll start to see why, because it's necessary. You know, even this guy just said at the end of this clip, it's very necessary for those who feel that they need to speak out, but are a little bit afraid or don't want to be seen as whatever they brand you as, racist, a bigot, prejudice, this, that. It's essential that you speak out. You speak what you feel is right. You speak what you know in your heart to be right. Because, and I'll talk a little bit about of what I've seen so far in the video, because it wakes people up from this type of mass hypnosis that's going on when they're in mass formation. It wakes them up a little bit so they don't get deeper and deeper and deeper. You know, you're with somebody. You ever had somebody fall asleep on you and you know that they're sleepy, but every once in a while you say, hey, get up, get up. Like, why do you do that? Because you know that if you let them sit there for 30 minutes, they're going to get deeper and deeper asleep, and it's going to get harder and harder to wake them up. That's why it's essential for us to speak up towards these ideologies, towards what's going on in the world. That's why it's essential. I want to talk about it so much more, but this guy explains it so much better than I can. I mean, he is just, I've never seen anybody be able to break down a subject so well. Again, his name is Matthias Desmet. I'll pull up here. This is the book, The Psychology of Totalitarianism. I really suggest you get this book. I have it on the way to me right now. It's so good. It's so good. I mean, if this guy wrote it and he's breaking it all down the way he is, it's definitely not going to be something I regret having. And it's good to have things like this before they just don't allow you to have things like this. Like if you notice here, the Amazon, like if I go here, it'll show that it has a 4.7 rating, but the stars aren't filled in for some reason. You know, it's weird. So get it while you can. Get it while you can. My buddy always says, get the books before they burn them. But yeah, we're gonna get into this some more. But again, mass formation. Look into that term. Look into that term, mass formation, a little bit for yourself, and really try to think about where you've seen it in the world, and where you felt it, and what side you felt you were on, you know, or the times where you were silent when you knew that you shouldn't have been silent. You know, I can think of a bunch of times, but rarely am I silent. So, you know, anyway, guys, what do you think in the comment section? Let me know what you think. Let me know what's going on in your mind when you hear this type of stuff. Do you think it's all nonsense and there's no mass formation? People just feel a certain way and then they voice things and some don't. I think it's a real thing. And I think it correlates to what we were talking about before. If you look into the psychology of survival, how 10% of people, it's the 10, 80, 10 rule. It's how 10% of people are subject to hypnosis and they fall into that, or also die when it comes to disasters. There's 80% of people who could go either way, given the right information or the wrong information. And then there's 10% of people who make it. And I'll liken that to 10% of people who know that they should speak out. I think there's a big correlation there. But let me know in the comments what you're thinking about this. All right. Other than that, I'm out. Sold, not for sale.